All right, welcome to the little aquarium alcove. We're actually at Matt's house. Matt is my editor and also is the videographer, so we thought it'd be fun to make a few videos. We're actually at his house right now, and he asked me to take a look at this aquarium. There's a couple of 20 longs right here. One of them has a bunch of fish in there. One has just some plants and some other stuff going on, but they had an issue with this aquarium. So he asked for me to kind of critique it and give my advice on what happened, what might have happened, and what they might want to do. So basically what we have here is we have a 20-gallon long, and the way that it looks now is not uncommon. I've seen many, many tanks like this, you know, just over the years, from people asking about how to fix their aquarium, sending photos, that kind of thing. And basically it's just a tank that's full of plants. It's kind of a mishmash thing, and there's a bunch of mulm and detritus in there. There's some different substrates. There's some wood that is in various conditions. So what we want to do is we want to talk about what happened. So what happened is there were a bunch of fish in here, and there were shrimp and other things in there, and they had a big ammonia spike, to the point where the fish were gasping at the surface. Put them over in this tank, everyone's fine, and found out later that there were some fish that got trapped underneath some rocks, some coolie loaches, and when you have a fish that's dying, it will decompose, and then you'll get a big ammonia spike. If your aquarium is not prepared to handle that excess bioload, then you're gonna have those elevated levels. Now, even though there's a lot of plants in here, and usually that does help with consuming those excess ammonia and nitrite that happens in the aquarium, there's a couple things going on. This aquarium has some different substrates. So in here we've got some fluval stratum, and then there's gravel, white and black gravel. Now, fluval stratum is a good substrate in the right situation. In fact, I have it in one of my aquariums that's heavily planted. What I see here is fluval stratum will actually kind of give off nutrients, release nutrients, and it could actually impact your water parameters. So using a substrate like this is really designed for plants that are going to be in the substrate and root feeders. In this aquarium, there's a mixture of substrate plants and floating plants, but what I see is the floating plants are kind of dominating. So floating plants are blocking the light, so that means the plants down below are not getting the necessary amount of light to grow. And then additionally, I see some die-off of some of the leaves in this plant, in this tank. So like, for example, this Amazon sword plant, it looks like it's nutrient deficient. Matt is using Easy Green and fertilizing, and that's helping some of these other plants in there that are floating, but it's not helping the sword plant. The sword plant can probably benefit from some root tabs, and some of these plants that are in the substrate could also benefit from having more light hitting them so that they're not being blocked out by the floating plants. The other thing that's going on that I see in this tank is it's been kind of neglected, and you know, Matt did admit so.
Very busy.
Very busy editing my videos and Irene's videos, Girl Talks Fish, but there's a lot of detritus in here. So when you have any kind of spike in, let's say, ammonia in this example, it's because of organic material that's breaking down. That could be a dead fish, it could be a dead invertebrate, it could be rotting wood. So there's wood in here. Depending on the wood, if it's too much wood and it's not being cleaned, if the surface of the wood is not being cleaned, but let's say by a pleco or shrimp or snails, then you can also have that. And then all this dying leaf matter is very similar to a dying fish, right? It's still organic matter, and it's still breaking down, and if there's not enough to consume that, then you're gonna have those elevated levels. So how do we fix it? I would suggest either doing a substrate change, maybe taking out some of the stratum if you're not gonna go full on like carpet, or, you know, I think these are like dwarf chain swords or something, but give them a little bit more space to move out and propagate further. Clean up all the detritus. Get in there and suck it all out. You know, siphon it out and get all those dead leaves and all that mulm out of there, because it's not helping your situation. Use some root tabs. Maybe clear out some of these floating plants, or attach them to the wood, or put them in an area that's gonna allow for that light to get down to the lower plants. But then also you need a cleanup crew in here. So there's no snails or shrimp or anything in here. I think this tank could benefit from some snails. Now, some people don't like aquarium snails. There's actually a video where Dean, master breeder Dean, and I were like pro snail, you know, anti snail. I'm pro snail, he's anti snail. But snails in this situation would have helped out a lot. For example, if you had something like Malaysian trumpet snails in this tank, they're gonna go and they're gonna churn up that substrate because they bury themselves in the daytime, they'll come out at nighttime. But those dead fish that were in there, the ones that were buried underneath the rocks, they would have gotten consumed by the snails and you would not have had as much of an ammonia outbreak because those snails would have been breaking that down and converting the rotting fish essentially into a more broken down nutrient that the plants might have been able to consume a little bit easier. And they would also help with cleaning out some of this mold and detritus in there. They're gonna help break that down again, and you're gonna have less of that. So that's what I would do. I don't wanna beat up Matt and say that the tank's bad, but the situation was there was a huge ammonia spike and things kind of, went to the wayside. So definitely there's an opportunity. So I would say having a cleanup crew, snails would really benefit, maybe putting in, not a lot, because some of these snails will propagate and you're gonna have an explosion of snails, especially if they have a lot to eat. But putting in 2 or 3 Malaysian trumpet snails, they will multiply, but if you only put in a couple, you can kind of keep control of that. And they're easy to remove. You can put in a couple other snails in there if you wanted to, and take some of the advice on the plants. Consider, removing the stratum if you're not gonna do a bunch of carpeting plants or plants that are really big root feeders. A couple other things that I see, the sponge filter. So there's a hang on the back filter and there's an Aquarium Co-op sponge filter. Now that's great filtration. You've got filtration, mechanical, biological, you have aeration going on. So you've got a lot of additional oxygen in there because of the sponge filter. But there's no uplift tube. Now I've seen people do this before where they don't put an uplift tube on a sponge filter. And I've done this way before too. But what happens is if you need that filter to do more filtration, to do a better job of filtering, then you're gonna need that uplift tube. So aquarium companies would not include an uplift tube if it wasn't needed because they would save money in packaging and production and everything if they didn't have that. So that uplift tube actually helps to generate the flow of air and the flow of water. So if you have that uplift tube, it's gonna actually kind of increase the speed of the bubbles going up and help to kind of draw the water through the sponge and up. So I would recommend adding the uplift to the sponge filter, maybe putting the sponge filter on the other side of the tank. So you've got the hang on the back on one side, you got the sponge on the other. That's gonna allow for some more water movement, so you'll have less of these kind of dead spots. Adding some cleanup crew, kind of addressing some of the plants, doing some root tabs in there for some of these root feeders, and trimming back. I think some people are afraid to cut their plants, and I know that you have some scaping scissors over here. So I think these are the Aquarium Co-op ones, but you've got these scaping scissors, so definitely use them. Go in there, cut off all the leaves that aren't new growth or doing well, and if they're halfway laced, which is basically like dying, then cut those, because all they're doing is they're just taking energy away from the plant. So that plant's like fighting to like keep that leaf alive. But if you just cut that leaf, then it can take all that energy and focus it on new growth or growing larger or having better leaves. So overall, I think you're in a good spot. I mean, you've got an established aquarium. There's lots of beneficial bacteria in there now, of course. You've got lots of plants, but I think it just needs a little bit of focus on tidying things up and getting in the right inhabitants to kind of make things work. So I'm excited to see Matt or Andrea, or maybe both of them, take some of these suggestions and fix this tank a little bit, and maybe we'll see it in the future in some B-roll of one of my videos. But yeah, I love the 20 long. I think it's a great platform. It gives you lots of space, footprint wise, to do different things with plants and fish. And I think this could be a great tank for like a nano community tank or a bunch of shrimp or something like that. But yeah, I think if you fix some of those things, it's gonna be a lot better for you and you're not gonna have that ammonia spike. It's not uncommon for something like this to happen. So if your tank happens to look like this and maybe you're not sure if you have a problem, I would say test to make sure. Get yourself some multi-test strips, or maybe you already have some, or you have a master test kit. You can test for ammonia, you can test for nitrite, nitrate, pH, GHK, etc. But basically what you want to do is you want to check to see how things are going in the aquarium, And testing is really gonna help you, because at first look, if Matt didn't tell me that there was a huge ammonia spike, I would think there's probably enough plants in there to keep things healthy and it's probably just fine, not knowing what had happened with the dying fish and that there's no cleanup crew. So anyway, hopefully this video has helped you in kind of maybe troubleshooting some things that might be happening in your aquariums. And let me know down in the comments if you've experienced something like this, or maybe if this has kind of helped you point in the right direction. If you want to learn more about the subject and other videos like this, click the link right here.